All right, folks, well, let's begin the session. Good day to every one of you. Thank you for taking your time and joining in for today's masterclass. I'm so glad to be taking this session. I'm Zafania B. I'm from the ITSM suite of products for ManageEngine. And this is the episode 4 for season 1. This is the penultimate episode for the season 1 of this year's masterclass series. And this session, we're going to focus on IT asset management, right? More specifically, we're going to see how you could build an IT asset management strategy from scratch for managing your hardware, software, and even how you could, mitigate your incidents with incident impact or minimize its impact with CMDB. And we'll also see how you could optimize your IT budgets throughout it all with a robust strategy, right? So, if you are new to this masterclass, we'll be doing a quick housekeeping announcement to all the attendees over here to just ensure that how the platform works and all that. So, first off, all your lines are muted by default. So, if you'd like to voice out anything, you have a questions panel on the left-hand side of the screen to add in your questions throughout the series. We have Deepa and Saket over here to answer your questions while during the presentation. We also have a separate Q&A session at the end of the masterclass presentation where we'll be answering your questions, more technical questions live, and Deepa would be helping us over there as well. Of course, recording of this session is being recorded, and this recording would be sent to all registrants. So you need not worry if you'd like to receive rewatch it or share it with your team later. We'll be emailing it in about 3 to 4 days. We need a few days to process the videos from across different time zones. And for any feedback or any other questions that that couldn't be touched upon in this masterclass, you could drop an email to hello@servicedeskplus.com, or you could send it to my email address as well. I'll be happy to sort it out for you. My email address is on the screen, zafania.b@zohocop.com. All right, folks. So now that the housekeeping items are out of the way, I'd like to start this session with a poll, right? So, since it's about IT asset management, one of the pressing issues right now that we're seeing is a hybrid environment, right? And how we have to manage remote IT assets as well and resident, corporate IT assets. So, Saket will be flashing the poll to your screen right now. So do participate in the poll. Just want to gauge the audience, the type of audience we have. If I'm pretty sure most of you would be saying yes, because in this current climate, most enterprises around the world have switched to, the hybrid environment. So we'll keep the poll open for about 10 seconds so that all of you participants, all of you can participate in it. Let's wait for the results right now. So yeah, as I thought, so most of you has selected yes, and then it is pretty obvious, right? So today, to ensure to build build upon your current hybrid and hybrid workspace or the hybrid IT environment that you're managing, we are going to learn 3 different lessons, right? 3 lessons from this data analytics and consultancy firm. 3 lessons. The first one being how you could manage an IT and asset, the hardware assets, which are both spread across the world from employees working from anywhere, and also which is within the corporate perimeter. How do you handle such a hybrid environment, right? How do you manage it and track it? Second, the anxiety and the worries that comes during a software audit, right? How do you mitigate the risk of non-compliance or to a software license agreement? How do you mitigate a risk during a software audit, right? So we're going to take a look at software management. And finally, we're going to see how CMDB assists in resolving a major incident quicker. How it quick accelerates the decision making process during a major incident resolution, right? So we're going to take a look at hardware asset management, software asset management, and CMDB. So let's dive into our first lesson for today, which is hardware asset management, right? And break down what are the challenges that are involved in it. So it would be like how we could build and manage an IT asset inventory for the hybrid environment, right? So the challenges that essentially comes with hardware asset management were three major things for this data consultancy firm, right? So the first one being they had a very poor legacy tool, an ineffective tool to discover and bring the assets to manage it in a single system of record, right? So they couldn't manage all IT assets in a single repository. Second, they were not able to track their IT workstations that were provided to their remote employees. So, which was because they were outside the corporate perimeter, they were outside the corporate network, and they could not have a grasp over it. And finally, one key challenge that they faced was they were not able to satisfy the SLAs in the request fulfillment process. For instance, during an employee onboarding process, while everything was going smooth, suddenly they realized that their asset inventory has depleted, and then they have to send out a purchase order, and again delay the entire onboarding process. So these kind of issues were being plagued for this consultancy firm, right? So how do we overcome these blind spots that they faced in their IT asset management, right? For especially for their hardware. So they, with ServiceDesk Plus capabilities, they built out an IT asset management tool chain, right? A 5-step process, right? The first one being discovering the IT asset that are spread across the globe and also across the enterprise, right? So both on-premises and remote IT assets, discovering it and bringing it together onto a single inventory. So how do they do it? So let's take a look at the various ways where you could bring in assets from externally to the ServiceDesk Plus database, right? So right now I'm going to head to the ServiceDesk Plus UI. So this is a pretty familiar screen for most of you here. So I'm going to head to the purchases module where you could receive items that you created using purchase orders, and once the vendors have shipped it to you, you can receive it and directly add it to your asset inventory, right? So I'm going to head to the purchases module, and over here we have several purchase orders that are listed here. So to receive an item, all you have to do is, once you create a purchase order, just open the purchase order and then click on actions and click on receive items. And you can either partially receive it depending on how much, how much quantity the vendor has, dispatched it. And let's say that we received all the 10 Aruba access points right now, and we're going to click on receive items, and now all the access points have been added to our asset inventory, right? So that is one easy way of adding in the asset inventory, right? Now let's head over and see the other ways where assets can be discovered, especially using the agent and agentless scans. So we're going to head back into the admin section. In the admin section, we have a separate category, a separate segment for discovery methods, right? So over here, when you head to the agent configuration, you could download the various agents such as the Windows agent, the Linux agent, and the Mac agent, and you could deploy it across your network where it would fetch the asset details and then populate it into your asset inventory. This details would be both hardware, software, the warranty information. We'll go into detail in a few minutes on what information it fetches in a few moments. So right now we are using a unified agent. So if you're leveraging Endpoint Central as well, Endpoint Central is our unified endpoint management suite from ManageEngine for proper granular access to all your endpoints in your corporate network, right? So if you integrate with Endpoint Central, you could use the unified agent and use a single agent to track all the assets and then populate it to your asset inventory. You could configure the agent, such as the agent security settings, the remote control settings. All of those configurations can be done in this page under the discovery tab, discovery category in the admin section, right? Now, apart from the agent-based discovery, you can also do a Windows domain scan, where you could create a domain and you could bring in assets that would hold the same domain. You could also do a network scan, right? So network scan would basically take the IP range, the network that you have in your enterprise, and it would fetch all the details holding that IP address, right? You could populate your credentials library as well, so that these credentials would be leveraged in any scan database, or as and when necessary, the agent would leverage these credentials and would access the workstation. So under the discovery, you have agent configuration, which would be the downloadable agent that you could deploy to the lightweight agent that you could deploy to your um, workstations in the network. You can do a Windows domain scan and a network scan. Now, we also saw the challenge of tracking the remote assets that in the data consultancy firm, right? So that can be done with the distributed asset scan. So with distributed asset scan, you could choose to have one of the workstations or one of the systems in the distributed region as a remote server. So this remote server would fetch all the details in that specific geological region or in that specific zone, and then it would export all the assets that it has fetched from the agent from there, and it would send it over to the central server, which is over here, right? So, and we could import that data and then populate our asset inventory. So in this way, you could also track the remote assets that are spread across the world, especially in this hybrid environment, right? So distributed asset scan is a key it's a key necessity, especially for that this data consultancy firm leveraged to track both their on-premises and their remote assets. All right. So we saw all these discovery options using, the network, the agents. So one last way that you could bring in assets is through barcode scanning, right? You could scan the barcodes that are sent you from the vendors, or you could print the barcodes manually as well. So you could access the barcodes by heading to the asset module. In the asset module on the left hand panel, you have a separate category for barcode. You could generate a barcode, you could use the vendor's barcode over here. So and you could print a barcode that you need, right? So you could manually key in the various barcodes separated by comma, and you could configure the label size, the printer resolution, the gap between the labels in the row, the row in the labels. So you could essentially configure all that basic, the physical properties of the label over here. And or you could also create a sequential barcode as well, by just giving a prefix and a suffix and a starting number and the number of count, and you could just click on print. So this is the final way how you could add in assets. It's either through barcode scanning too. All right, so we saw the first step of this framework, right? How to discover assets. Now let's see the second step, which is classifying assets in the single database. So you saw the glimpse of all the asset classifications in the asset module, right? So, we're back in ServiceDesk Plus UI, and on the left-hand panel, you could see the various asset classifications. We see IT assets, and under IT assets, we have several subcategories, right? It could be an access point, it could be a router, it could be a switch, a workstation. Similarly, we have various categories: virtual hosts, VMs, non-IT assets. You can also track the peripherals and the software, and all of these are completely customizable, right? Your organization would be tracking it with different labels. You could be tracking different types of assets as well that are not listed here. So where do you customize these classification labels? So it's quite the name itself says it. So in the admin section, we have a separate menu for customization. So the customization takes care of all these kind of label names, the parameters that are across each module. So we can customize each of the labels that are available, each of the parameters that are available in every module, such as the help desk, the change management, release management. So we're just going to head over to the asset management customization menu, and the tab that is listed here is the product type. So over here, you could add new product types. You could choose the IT asset, whether it's an asset, whether it's a peripheral, which is a component, or it's a consumable, whether it's just an A4 sheets, a bundle of A4 sheets, or whether it's the wire tags, or whether it's a toner ring, whether it's just a consumable. So you could track all these three, and you could choose the IT asset category, whether it's IT or non-IT, and then give a quick description and save it. So in this way, you could essentially configure the classifications in your IT asset inventory, and then bring in all the IT assets and classify it on each category and subcategory. All right. Now we also have I'm going to head back to the asset module, and under asset on the left hand panel, we also have a way to group your assets, right? So asset grouping is essentially helpful when you have to take collective action on assets, like deploying a patches. You just need to know how many assets we are there that are running Windows 10 or Windows 8.1 that needs to have this vulnerability patch sent out, right? So you could create a new group by clicking on the plus icon under the group. Click on the plus icon, and you could just give a quick name, for instance, like Windows Workstations, already popping up in the hover box. And you can create two types of groups here, right? You could create a static group, or you could create a dynamic group. So a static group is something where you manually select all the assets that would fall under the specific category or specific group. Or you could choose a dynamic group where you just have to set the criteria. Whatever assets that matches the criteria would be added into the group. This also includes any assets that are discovered, any assets that are brought into the asset inventory later on. It would just quickly run through and check the criteria. If the asset matches the criteria, it would be added into this group. Now, let's create a dynamic group and see how it works. Dynamic group is more fun since it's automated. It's easier than manually selecting it in a static group, but each has its necessities, right? Sometimes you might need a static group if if there is no commonality between any of the assets that you're choosing in that group. So right now, let's choose a criteria for this dynamic group, which is Windows Workstation, right? So I'm going to choose the OS, right? So the OS has to contain any form of Windows, right? So once I click choose, it redirects me to a dialog box where I could choose what words it needs to check for. So gonna check whether it contains the word Windows in its OS, right? So once I click save, I could just save and view group, and we could see that several of the assets that are running on Windows OS are all fetched. In fact, we have 33 assets. All of that are fetched and then added into this group. It's simple as that. And you could manage this group over here by clicking on manage group, and then you could edit or delete it depending on the need of the hour right now. All right. So right now we saw the second part of the ITAM framework, which is classifying the assets, right? We saw asset classification and asset groups. The third part, we're going to see all the details that the asset workstations that are discovered and added to the inventory. We're going to see what information it has fetched. We're going to see how you could assign it. We're going to see how you could push it through the various life cycle and even loan it to end users right now. All right, I'm heading back to the asset module. Over here on the left-hand panel, we have the IT asset category. Under here, we have the subcategory workstation, right? Once I click it, we have all the list of workstations that is running, that is available in the data consultancy firm's IT environment. So I'm going to quickly choose one asset over here that was discovered by the agent. And once I open it, we have several tabs listed here, right? So we have the IP address of it, the asset details, which contains the disk space, the purchase cost, the warranty information. The hardware tab pretty much shows the processor, the memory, the network adapters, all the information that it could fetch are added directly over here. The peripherals that are attached are also added here. And whatever software that the workstation houses, that is also fetched and added under each asset, right? So this also ensures that you could easily manage the software and track it and see whether if any assets are running prohibitive software or any blacklisted software as well. Now, under relationships, it quickly shows a map of who is managing this asset, whether this asset is exchanging data with any data centers, what kind of applications are run in this asset. Is it very critical to the business? Or is the impact a business impact high for this asset? You could create a quick visual map and add it to your asset for each asset as well. Now, this is not a completely manual process. This information is directly fetched from the CMDB module of ServiceDesk Plus. Now, we'll head over to the CMDB module and go in depth a little later in this session itself. So you need not worry. We'll go in and see how you could create this visual interactive map, how you could create all these relationships later, which would be then reflected in the asset management module. All right, you could also configure, associate any contracts that are that are relevant to this asset, and you can track the financial data of that is for this asset. So currently the book value, despite the purchasing cost being $2,000, currently the book value is $1,928, right? So you could quickly have a depreciation count and see the depreciation details both annually and monthly, so that it gives a good idea of how much value your IT environment is holding at any current moment, right? So during your quarterly reports, you could always make sense of how much your IT budget has been spent and how whether the value has been recognized with these depreciation details, right? You could configure the depreciation by clicking on plus depreciation, give the basic details necessary, such as the acquisition date, and choosing which kind of depreciation method is needed. So, right, so we have four methods that are available in ServiceDesk Plus. We have the declining balance, double declining balance, straight line, and sum of the year digits. So depending on it, you would get a quick and the useful life that you once you give it. Depending on it, you would get a quick idea of how much book value and the remaining life it has at the end of year. So we at 2027, this asset's book value would just be about $654, right? Now, also, this asset has any associations with any changes, any incidents, or any problems. All of that information will be fetched and then automatically populated here. So, if this asset has been a bit troublesome, it's been having a lot of problem tickets raised on it, all of that details can be tracked in the asset management module as well. All of this is centrally tracked. Now, you can also assign it by clicking on the assign button and then choosing the user and the department that it needs to be assigned to. And we also have a checkbox that says whether this asset is loaned. So you can quickly loan it over here, but we'll go into detail on how to loan it, how you could track all the loaned assets in just a bit, right? Okay. So once you assigned it, this state would go to in use, right? So once we click on one of the users, it would click and click save. It changes the state to in use. So similarly, you could change the state, you could then, once it goes to repair, you could change it to in repair and then all the way up to disposed. So these asset states together comprises of the asset life cycle that you would hold in your enterprise. So asset life cycle varies for each enterprises depending on your process. So where do you customize the asset life cycle? A very easy guess would be in the customization menu, right? So I'm back in the admin section, or you know what, I'll just close the window and come back. So I'm just going to click the gear icon over here and then open the admin menu, and then we have the customization option available on the top right hand side of the screen. Over here, you could choose the asset management category and you could choose the asset state. And under asset state, you would have all the asset state that are already listed. You could also create new asset state, and then you could choose whether any asset state requires a scan or requires ownership, right? All right. So once you manage to configure your asset state that is useful for your asset life cycle, you could check out the final box that is over here, which is whether this asset is loaned or not. Right now it says no, right? So how do you loan this asset? Generally every IT department gives out assets, right? So it could just be for sales team traveling to an event, and then they would just be getting an asset that is needed for that event. And sometimes we forget to track the assets, right? Sometimes they forget to return the assets, and all of these assets together in fact hits the cost center, right? As an IT, it's a cost center, right? It hits the books over there and the value would be diminished, right? So if all these assets are become untrackable, right? So you could maintain a loan registry right within ServiceDesk Plus. So how do we do it? Head to your assets module. On the left hand panel, you have a separate category called asset loan. So over here, you could maintain a loan registry. So a loan registry basically records all the users who have taken a loan for each asset. If you can create a new loan by clicking on new loan, choose what kind of assets by name or by scanning the barcode. Let's say a MacBook Pro is being loaned out. choose the date range in which the loan would be valid. It could be from today to about a week from now. And then you could choose the user to which the loan is going to go to. So let's choose Ben as the loanee right now, right? So I'm going to check out, and then the loan registry is added over here. So each loan user can loan more than one assets as well, right? So for instance, we have Anto Williams over here who has loaned 4 workstations. You can extend the loan, or you can even return the loan depending on the due date that will be that will be tracked. And as the due date nears by, an alert would be sent out to the IT admin as well. All right. Next up, you could also maintain a record of all the assets that are loaned. So here's a clear distinction, a clear difference between the loan registry and the loaned asset, right? So the loan registry basically maintains all the users who have taken a loan, whereas the loaned assets maintain all the assets that are loaned, right? So if you notice over here, several assets have the same loan ID and the same user who has loaned it, right? It's Anto Williams. So you get a quick idea of the 2 different types of record that you can maintain for just to manage your loaned assets. You can also mark all the assets that are loanable by just clicking on the mark loanable assets and then choosing manually on all the assets from your inventory. And you could have a quick repository of assets that are available to be loaned. And finally, under asset loan, you have loan expired asset, which maintains a record of all the expired loans, right? Ones that are way past the due date and the asset hasn't been returned back to the asset inventory, right? So you can keep track of all the expired loans as well in a separate record. All right. So now we basically saw the third part of the framework. So finally, let's see how to overcome the the depleted issue that they faced during the employee onboarding process, right? For the asset replenishment. So in the same assets module, we have a separate automation for asset replenishment, which send out alerts when a certain threshold is reached in the asset count. For instance, let me create a new notification alert and choose that it's going to be in California site, and the product type that needs to be alerted is keyboard. So you can basically set alerts for IT assets, for consumables, non-IT assets, depending on your asset inventory portfolio. So over here, let's say that it's a red gear keyboard. So current inventory count is 7. So let's say that once it reaches 2, we have just 2 more of the keyboard, it would send out a new notification, to send out an alert to the administrator so that a purchase order can be raised and then sent to the vendor. So this ensures that you can stay proactive and your request fulfillment process would never breach an SLA just because your asset inventory was depleted, right? All right. So the final thing was troubleshooting remote IT assets, right? So that was the final step of the framework that they needed. They had employees working from everywhere. So how do they remotely access this workstations for incident resolution? So what you can head over to one of the assets. So let's just open one of the workstations that we have over here, and at the at the top menu we have a separate menu for remote control, right? So with RDP protocol, you can create a remote session, right? So let's say that it's going to be an incident diagnosis. Let's give a reason. You can click on connect and it would initiate a remote session. Now, this remote session is basically run using the endpoint central integration. So you would need an endpoint central integration to ensure that you could remotely access all the assets that you have in your inventory right from ServiceDesk Plus console, right from the ticket console. All right. So now we saw the first lesson. We saw how we could break it down into this framework, the 5-step framework, and we saw the ServiceDesk capabilities that has been supporting it. So let's head over to the second lesson, which is worrying just about your work and not about the compliance issues, right? Stay focused on your business without compliance and risk management worries. So Whenever a software audit comes, sometimes it could be a nervous situation if your IT environment is not managed and tracked well, right? So the three main things that the software audit that brought up, the three main worries that were brought up for this data consultancy firm was, number one, whether they were non-compliant with license agreements. How under licensed were they? Whether they are using, whether there are installations, whether there are workstations in their environment that are running software that they do not have license for. Second, are they having underused license? Are they not spending their budgets rationally? These are the questions that are plaguing their IT admins as well, right? So they are they being over licensed? So it's always not so great to have to be over licensed for software that are not frequently used. It's just wasted value, especially on the IT budgets, right? So optimizing their IT budget, one of the key steps is to ensure that the money spent on licenses is optimized. And finally, for that to know, they need to know the purchase and spending patterns, right? So they, rather than having a question mark over it, they need to know clearly how they have been spending, how they plan to spend in the future. So these are the three roadblocks that they were facing. And how did ServiceDesk Plus help them overcome it? Which capabilities came into the picture for their to overcome these roadblocks? So essentially, it's again a five-step framework. And first up, it's identifying the software licenses and installations, right? So we saw the various asset scans, the discovery options that are available. All of that not just brings in the hardware information, we saw it also brings in the software information. So let's take a look at the software repository, see all the scan software, see all the information available, and then we'll head over. Okay, so I'm back in Service Desk Plus. I'm going to head back to the assets module. So in the assets module over here on the left hand panel, we have the software category. And under the software category, once I click the scanned software, it literally lists all the software that is listed. So it is fetched about 133 software over here, and about 10 are listed. And you can quickly see what kind of compliance it holds, what type of software, whether it's purchased, whether it's whether it's installed, allocated, whether there are license to allocate. All of that information can be fetched and added over here. So you can also quickly head into one of these software and then see whether you have any licenses available. Let me pick up one of the softwares that are listed here. um, Let me choose search for one of the software that actually has a license right now, so that it's easier to show you how it's easy to allocate a license right now. All right, so over here, let me open one of the existing assets. Okay, and then let's say that it's for ManageEngine Analytics Plus. So it quickly gives you an idea of all the software details that are available, the installations, the assets that the software is running on, and you could choose to send an email to the software, or if you have any assets, or if you have any licenses for this, you could add it directly in the software category over here. So, and then you could manage it right from the scanned software page as well. So this basically has a record of all the scanned software. Apart from that, you could quickly get, with the software summary, you could quickly get an idea of how compliant you are. It maintains a real-time dashboard on whether you are compliant, whether you are over licensed or under licensed. So we can see that we are severely under licensed, right? So there are many installations in the IT environment that are running software to which we do not have license for. And also it gives you a license usage summary and overall software usage summary as well. Now, how this software usage is measured, I'll go into depth a little later on. So right now, the software summary tab under the software asset management gives you an instant idea of how compliant you are. So you do not have to worry about audits, or you have a clear idea of what needs to be done before an audit, right? The next record that we have, a database that we have, is the license agreement. You could track the entire the entire license agreement within ServiceDesk Plus as well. So this is especially useful when you are having a warranty claim, or if you need to refer back to your license agreement for a renewal process. So when you have all your license agreement right over here, as it nears expiry date, the administrator would be notified to choose whether they could renew it, or whether they could cancel the agreement for since it might not be useful. And right within the asset license agreement, you also have the option to add in licenses that are relevant, that are associated with this agreement directly over here. So we saw basically two records. One that just has the software, the scanned software. Over there also you could add the licenses, and you could also have the license agreement record. Over there also you could add the licenses. So we have an interconnection between all the records, and we also have a separate record for software licenses as well. And over here, as I said, that all of these are interconnected. When you open one of these software licenses, you could also associate the contracts that are the license agreements, the contracts that are associated with the software license, that can be added directly over here. So the entire software asset management, you'd have a complete central grip, right, on all facets. You from the license front, from this installation front, from the license agreement front, you would be tracking it in all angles, right? And so once you've had a complete idea of how compliant you are, how much software you have, how what are the applications that are running in your enterprise, and you keep track of your installations and allocate it as and when necessary, you could also have a metering option. Now, this metering option can be accessed from the admin section. I'm going to open the admin menu over here. And under the customization menu, under asset management, we have a separate tab called software metering. So over here, you could choose how a software is classified as rarely used, frequently used, or occasionally used. For instance, we have this LibreOffice configuration. So for that, we have seen that the criteria can be configured on two counts, which is basically whether it's with runtime. So runtime is counts on how long the software has been open on a 90-day window. So per quarter, how long has the software been open on each asset? Second, the run count, right? How many times the software has been opened and closed during a 90-day window, during a quarter, right? So you can also choose the variables over here on how many hours is rarely used according to you, how many hours is frequently used according to your organization policies. You could configure that over here and add the various other softwares that needs to be metered. So this gives a clear idea of what IT licenses that needs to be, the software license that needs to be purchased later on, because you do not need to purchase too many licenses and have it in stock for rarely used software, right? So all of this helps you optimize your IT asset budget. All right. Now, final way to help with your IT asset budget is through the reports module. You head to your reports module. You have hundreds of canned reports for all modules, and when you scroll down, you have a separate separate folder for the software asset modules, software asset reports as well. Once you click it, it instantly generates all this necessary information. For instance, how much software was purchased, how much is installed. So we can see that the Office 365, we have purchased 3 and we have installed only 2. So totally available is 3, whereas 1 is available for installation, right? So you can get a quick idea of how to optimize your spending patterns with these canned reports. And of course, these canned reports can only go so far, right? So you can also create query reports to get that exact detail from the ServiceDesk database that is needed to make that the last mile decisions, that the insight that would give you the to help you make the last mile decisions, right? So you could create new query reports as well. All right, so now we saw how you could ace your audit with ServiceDesk Plus. We saw the 5 steps on identifying software, license types, compliance status, how you could manage the license to users, employees, and staying on top of purchase patterns, right, with reports and software metering. So let's head to our fourth and final lesson of today's session, which is how do you reduce the impact or how do you mitigate the impact of a major incident, especially when you need a visual view of the IT infrastructure, right? So let's give a quick context over here. The data analytics firm, during one of its routine maintenance job, one of its backbone servers, right, where that whole it essentially took down the entire network, right, while trying to upgrade the backbone servers, which basically stalled all their business operations. So how do they, to ensure to quickly see which segment of their infrastructure they need to isolate, which part needs quick resolution. The need of the hour that they had was to visualize the complex IT environment that they had, so that they could quickly deploy the necessary resources, and they could quickly get into the incident resolution phase, right? So how did they bring about this? So they leveraged the CMDB module. So they created CI types. They were able to identify the CIs from the ITAM database, and they were able to build in relationships between the CIs, and then they created business views out of it, right, which basically gave them a visual view of the infrastructure that they had. Now let's head over to the CMDB module of ServiceDesk Plus. We'll see how you could create new CI types, how you could create new relationships between them, and how you could create new business views. So I'm going to head back to the ServiceDesk Plus module. Over here, I'm going to choose the CMDB module right now. And on the left hand side, you could see all the various CI types listed here, right? So this is very similar to the asset inventory, the asset categories that we saw, right? Asset types that you can create. So these CI types can also be customized to suit your organization. A quick info about what a CI is to any person who is not aware. So CI is a configuration item, essentially any component that is needed for your service delivery. If it needs to be managed, if it's holding any data, if it's holding any information, and it needs to be managed, it is considered as CI. So therefore it could be a person, it could be a department, it could be an access point, it could be a firewall. All of that comes under CI, so that you could build a comprehensive asset infrastructure, right? Sorry, the IT infrastructure, right? Now, just like while there are a complete comprehensive list of CIs and subcategories listed in this on the left hand panel, you could create new CIs by heading to the admin section. And just like asset management, under the customization menu, you have the CMDB as well. Once you click it, you could add various CI types, and you could also add the relationship types under the customization here as well. So when I click on the relationship types, it lists all the relationship types that are available right now. So we can see that, for instance, if a workstation is exchanging data with a data center, you could add it, right? Right now we say that there is an exchanges data with a relationship, and the inverse of it being for an inverse, it just says has to be exchanges. But you have two ways to add it, right? Whether it supports or whether it's supported by, whether it consists or whether it's part of. So you have a relationship type and the inverse relationship type that could be configured over here. And you could add any a number of relationship types that could be later on fetched into the CMDB business views, right? So how do you create a new business view? So you head over to the CMDB, and we already have a couple of business views listed here. So the LMS backbone network is what went down, right? So a quick click to it, we can see the visual map of the CMDB, right? We can see the data center it hosts, and as I hover my cursor on top of these assets, we can see the relationship it holds between each CI, right? So this way you could essentially have an idea of which department, which person is managing it, what firewall, what application are running it. So it's easier to isolate your system. So it's easier to gauge the impact of the incident and make quick decisions on which IT infrastructure needs the resolution, or where the SRE teams need to be deployed, All that decisions can be had when you have a complete visual map. And we cannot rely on subject matter experts at very untimely hours, and ask them, which what data is being held on to this data center, where what data is being sent through, are there any PII data being sent through. All that information can be tracked in the CMDB relationship map itself. All right, so how do we create it? We can add CIs over here, and each of the CIs would have its own sub relationships. So the entire relationship map can be a complete view of uh, uh, how expansive it can get. So we can create new business views by heading back to your CMDB, clicking on new business views, choosing the root CI that the business view depends on. For instance, let's create one for the CRM application, right? So we have the CRM Plus that is running. So once I open it, we can see that it already has a few relationships, that it's hosted on such and such data center, it runs on the server, and it's used by the MedPar team, right? You can add new relationships for this and incrementally build your business view. So for instance, when I hover it on top of the CRM Plus label, we get a plus icon, and once I click it, it shows all the CIs that are available. I could choose the CIs that needs to be added. So there are two ways of adding it. We could choose a relationship, which is basically depends on software, whether it sends to an IT service. There is a list of all the relationships and the CI categories, or you can choose the CIs manually and then add the relationships, which is how I would generally prefer, because each organization would have its own relationship with the way the infrastructure is set up, right? So for instance, the CRM Plus is managed by Anto Williams. I'm going to choose Anto as a selected CI, and the relationship, I'm going to say it's managed by. So once I click add, this relationship is added. And when we head to the business view, we can see that Anto Williams is added. So Anto Williams is managing several other workstations as well. So we earlier we saw that Anto Williams had several loaned assets. So we can see all those loaned assets listed in the CMDB as well. So we can essentially build an incremental business view over here and click on save, and then say that this is a CRM application. So, and maybe make it public and choose to which technicians have access over it, or whether it's site based access. You could make all those configurations over here and click on save. Now, once you click on save, so any issues that the CRM would have over here, we could quickly use the business views for the CRM application, and then make decisions that would accelerate the incident diagnosis and resolution. All right, folks, we reached the end of the session. We saw three major lessons. We saw how with CMDBs we could create new CI types, create CI relationships between them, and create business views, right? So a quick recap on what we saw. First, we saw how you could manage your hardware assets, how you could discover them using agents, using the network scans, and you can also use the barcode scan and purchase orders, right? Then we saw within the asset inventory how you could classify the assets and group them using either a static group or a dynamic group. We can also manage all the assets in the loan registry and mark assets as loanable, so that you can keep track of all those assets even when they go back, even when they are not returned to the IT organization. And you could create automate alerts for asset replenishment, so that you would never you never end up with a request that was delayed just because you didn't have the asset in the inventory. And you could also have manage all the software license agreement and the software licenses combined in the software asset management. And with a quick view of the software summary, you would get an idea of whether you're compliant or not, whether you have software that is rarely used, frequently used. All that can be managed with software metering as well. Finally, we saw with CMDB how you could build business views, which would help you mitigate the impact of an incident, since you helps with faster decision making. All right, folks, we are at the end of the session. Thank you for your patience. You can, there are several ways that you could learn more about ServiceDesk Plus. The admin guide is the most obvious way. There is the product videos in the YouTube channel, and also the community, the pitch stop, and of course you can write to us at hello@servicedeskplus.com, and we would be happy to sort out any kind of issue that you have, any kind of feedback that you have, any topics that you'd like to go deeper. Just drop an email to hello@servicedeskplus.com, and we'd be happy to sort it out for you. All right, folks, have a great day ahead. Take care, and I'll see you in the next masterclass. This is Afan, and I'll be ending the session. Bye bye.